Billy Wilder Theater, home of the programs for UCLA Film and Television Archive. My name is Mark Quigley, and I'm the John H. Mitchell Television Curator. Thank you for joining us for our special screening celebrating the genius of Jay Ward with Rocky, Bullwinkle, Rarities, and more. We need Rocky and Bullwinkle more than ever right now. We have some very special guests in the house. Tiffany Ward, president of Ward Productions and daughter of the legendary Jay Ward, and Amber Ward, vice president and granddaughter of Jay Ward. Please give them a big hand for their kindness and making tonight possible. Also in the house, animation historian extraordinaire, Jerry Beck. I'm going to invite Tiffany, then Jerry, to take the stage in a moment for introductory remarks, but first, a word from our sponsors. Archive screenings in the Wilder are free, thanks to a gift from an anonymous donor. You might have noticed you didn't pay to get in tonight, so let's give that person a big hand. And tonight's screening is underwritten by the John H. Mitchell Television Programming Endowment. Special thanks also to our partners in the Hammer Museum and our invaluable community partners, Asifa Hollywood. I know there's a lot of you here. Let's hear it for Asifa Hollywood. Woo! And the UCLA Animation Workshop. In curating tonight's program, I paged many archival prints from the beloved Jay Ward film print collection at the UCLA Film and Television Archive. And I'd like to thank the archive's Tim Wilson for his expertise in inspecting and prepping prints for this program, and to the archive's digital lab manager, Randy Yantek, for his extensive efforts. Thank you, Tim and Randy. Tonight, our screening is in two parts with a brief intermission in between. You will see a non-chronological mega mix, including Jay Ward in D.C. lobbying for statehood for Musylvania during the Cuban Missile Crisis. You're also going to see a few Jay Ward pilots sprinkled in, Jay Ward cartoons, commercials, and commercials by other folks that are embedded in original broadcasts from ABC and NBC of Rocky and Bullwinkle. And those commercials were just too fun not to include. So if you're not sure if something is Jay Ward or not, the Wards are here. Jerry Beck is here. I can answer too, probably, so we'll help you out. If you're thinking, hey, that was a cool commercial, who was it? Note that what we're looking at tonight are from archival prints. They are well-loved and worn by time. Some color footage is faded. Some content that was made in color is in black and white, because in some markets, TV screened in black and white. And yes, some of what we're going to look at tonight even has laugh tracks as originally broadcast. All are imbued with the genius of the great Jay Ward. And for a little more context on the man behind the world-renowned productions, please welcome Tiffany Ward, president of Ward Productions.
It's wonderful to see you all here, and my dad would be so proud that his humor is still appreciated by people. I kind of thought I'd be talking to students, so I prepared a little thing on the history of Jay Ward. I'm not sure I see a student in here. I think it's all you animation fans and Jay Ward fans, but it is fantastic to be here. Dad started Ward Productions in 1958. And he ran it until 1989 when he passed way too young at the age of 69. I then came in, not programmed to do it, but luckily I could do it. I've actually run it now 35 years, which seems amazing to me. And my wonderful daughter Amber joined me in 2013, so it's the third. Amber, stand up a second. There she is. So now we're into the third generation, and two women, which is interesting. Anyway, I did want to share just a few things. I imagine you all know this, but my dad went to Cal Berkeley. Then he went to Harvard Business School in Boston. The war came along and he was in the military, and after the war ended, he went back to Harvard, finished up his degree, and came back to Berkeley, California, where he was born and raised up. And then, that was 1947, and he opened a real estate office because he thought that would be something good to do. Well, his childhood friend was Alex Anderson, who was the nephew of Paul Terry, who did Terry Tunes. You're of the generation, you will remember, we used to see a Terry Tune in front of a movie in the theaters. And Dad, with his Harvard degree now, said, you know, I think we ought to do something for this emerging network, new production called TV. So he and Alex actually created the first cartoon ever for television, which was Crusader Rabbit. Yeah. And if you remember, those of you who would remember, Crusader was a small, plucky rabbit, and his companion was Rags the Tiger, a big, dumb sidekick. Kind of reminds you later of Rocky and Bullwinkle and different animals. Anyway, Dad wasn't too keen on lawyers, unfortunately, and they didn't understand that somebody had kind of stolen the copyright from them. So Crusader Rabbit was on in 50-51, I'm pretty sure, and then they lost the copyright. And Dad went back to his real estate office, and Alex went into advertising in San Francisco. Well, Dad didn't quite get that bug out of him, and Alex didn't want to go back into animation. He'd had a bad experience, and he liked advertising. So Dad hired Bill Scott, the wonderful, incredible Bill Scott. And together they wrote the first couple of episodes, managed to sell it to General Mills, cereal General Mills, who became their sponsor. And Rocky and his friends, as it was titled with that, went on the air November 11th, 1959 on ABC. It was there for 2 years, and then they moved to NBC in 1961, retitled the show The Bullwinkle Show, because Bullwinkle was the breakout star at that time, and they moved to prime time, which was really special. Interesting enough, I think Mark has found footage. At that point, Dad was the great first showman, really. He created a picnic on Sunset Boulevard. So our studio, little miniature studio, is across the street from the Chateau Marmont on Sunset. He managed to get Sunset Boulevard closed down except for one lane. Isn't that amazing? And he held this giant kind of carnival. And I think that Mark had, and they unveiled the Bullwinkle statue at that time. Jane Mansfield, we remember her, and Peter Pitches, who was sheriff of Los Angeles County at that time, were there, and I think we're going to see some footage. So then Rocky and Bullwinkle went on and ended in 1964. Dad did Hoppity Hooper for General Mills, 108 episodes, a slightly less sophisticated show than Rocky and Bullwinkle, because General Mills wanted to kind of extend the series, but with something more child-oriented. I will tell you this, Dad said he never wrote for children, he always wrote for adults, and I think that's why we're here 66 years later. So we had Hoppity Hooper, and then in 1966 he created George of the Jungle, Tom Slick, and Super Chick, which went on the air in 1967. You are all these animation experts, I probably don't have to say. There were only 17 episodes of those three shows, but luckily for us, George of the Jungle and Super Chick had these really catchy theme songs. And of course, later we went on to make some George of the Jungle movies, so that was wonderful. And also, Mark has some film here of Fractured Flickers. So Fractured Flickers, a lot of people aren't as much aware of that. Dad did them in 1962, and his animators and artists all said it was the hardest thing they ever did. So he took black and white old films and created new, funny verbiage for them. My favorite always was he took The Hunchback of Notre Dame with Lon Chaney, and he made it into Dinky Dunstan, Boyd Shirley. Even I haven't seen any Fractured. I have them in the vault, but I haven't seen that in years, so we're going to get a taste of that. And then in 1962, Quaker Oats came to Dad and said, we've got a brand new cereal we've created. We're happy with the cereal. We want you to do everything, packaging, campaigning, commercials. So Dad and writers, etc., created Captain Crunch. So then Dad and family go on vacation for a week, and he comes back, and he'd left the artists with the idea they should create Captain Crunch, right? The image of this, sorry. Anyway, when he came back, Captain Crunch is my dad. They all thought that would be hysterical. And Dad looked at this and said, that's me. And they said, yes, well, Captain Crunch is still one of the top best-selling cereals in the world, and there are so many different varieties. And it's fun for me because every time I see one, I go, oh, hi, Dad. He did Quaker Oats commercials till 1983. Unfortunately, we're going to see a few pilots. Dad did some pilots and tried to sell them to networks. A combination of either the networks weren't into it or the networks wanted to control my father. And my father was terrible, and not terrible, but he kept to his standards and said he wouldn't do it their way. So we never got another cartoon show on. I ran into several people tonight, they said, I hope you tell stories. I said, well, I wasn't prepared to tell stories because I thought I was talking to students and informing them. But one of my favorite stories is in one of the famous episodes of Rocky and Bullwinkle. They're in Africa and they get put in a boiling cauldron of water by cannibals. So back in the early 60s, we had censors that were very critical. So the censors came to my dad and said, you cannot air that episode. And Dad said, why? He said, they're cannibals. They're roasting Rocky and Bullwinkle. And Dad said, it's a moose and a squirrel. Needless to say, Dad got the show on the air. He was a true, I'm so proud of him. He was such a genius, and he had a difficult life himself, but he felt that humor made the world just a better place. And he'd be so pleased that his mark of humor is still here with us, and you're here to enjoy it with all of us. So thank you for coming tonight.
And tonight's program started with a call to Tiffany Ward to say, can we do this? Can we do something at the water? And Tiffany and Amber were on board immediately. So thank you again so much for making it happen. I'm going to bring Jerry Beck up here now. For Jerry Beck, there's an animation screening or something happening in Hollywood. It's like Ghostbusters. Who are you going to call? Gotta call Jerry Beck. He's the author of more than a dozen books on animation. He teaches animation. He's an animation producer. He's an encyclopedia that walks around. He's got shoes, glasses. He's an encyclopedia. Come on, Jerry Beck.
I'll try to keep it brief, and Tiffany went over some of the things I might have mentioned. I'm just going to give a little, my own personal background and some historical stuff, but I was thinking, I jotted down, forget about Canada, statehood for Pennsylvania, right? With apologies to the I'm going to read, so please bear with me. With apologies to the Flintstones, I don't know about you, but my favorite cartoon theme is Super Chicken. To people of a certain age, my age, the golden age of TV animation was roughly 1959 to 1961. During that period, if you were an animation producer with some experience and you could secure a sponsor, you could maybe sell a half-hour show to the somewhat new medium of television. Jay Ward was one of those people. I'm not going to give you a history of the Jay Ward Studio tonight. For that, I would urge you to buy Keith Scott's book, The Mouse That Roared. If you don't have it, I have a feeling a lot of people here have that book. But Ward was a pioneer in television animation. As Tiffany said, he produced the first animated TV series in 1949, Crusader Rabbit. 10 years later, he had the background and experience to put together a cartoon studio the way he thought one should be. He put together a troupe of artists, writers, and voice performers in their prime who could take funny dialogue and make it funnier. The artists were mainly veterans of the hottest studio of the 1950s, UPA. Bill Hertz, Pete Burness, Ted Parmalee, Lou Keller pushed the stylized graphics and wonky character designs they honed at UPA toward a friendlier, funnier new characters for Jay Ward. The animation was limited, but the humor was unlimited. What is important from a historical perspective is that Ward continued the tradition of humor being the focal point of the animated cartoon. We love Rocky and Bullwinkle, Boris and Natasha, Peabody and Sherman, but it's what they say, how it's said, the mission they're on, the funny drawings that distinguish a Jay Ward cartoon from the others of the time. Oh, and this is really important. Tiffany said it. These cartoons were not aimed at children. You could tell. I was 5. I could tell. I love that promo where there's a promo where I don't think we're showing it tonight of Boris picketing the Rocky and his friends for being unfair to Local 12, Villains, Thieves, and Scoundrels Union. I saw that promo like 50 times when I was a kid. What did I know about unions, picket signs, or the Cold War? I just knew it was funny. Mom and Dad could laugh at Rocky and Bullwinkle too, at least at the gags that were over my head. I learned about classic movies from Fractured Flickers and those cast names on Dudley Do-Right. You know, Snidely Whiplash portrayed by Ned Sparks Jr. You know, like I had to know who Ned Sparks was. I mean, I need to know these things. There's so much to enjoy here. Yes, the animation was limited. Some of it was outsourced to Mexico and could get a little funky, but that's part of its charm. The shorts and commercials that were done in-house here in Hollywood are quite attractive. They had the hippest animation cartoonists of the golden age designing the backgrounds, doing the layout, and the diverse characters created for all those Aesop's and Son and Mr. Peabody and Fractured Fairy Tales. I mean, they had different characters in each one of those. Those were all created by the talented Al Sheen, Roy Morita, and Shirley Sibley. Bill Scott. I have to mention Bill Scott, of course. Ward's chief collaborator and creative partner. He started at Warner Brothers in the late 40s, wrote gags for Bob Clampett's Beanie and Cecil. He was a voice and story man for UPA. For Ward, he did it all as head writer, producer, and a voice. And in case you don't know, he was Bullwinkle, Dudley Do-Right, and I think Hippity Hopper. No, I got it. Anyway, what a team.
Here's Fillmore the Bear.
You can tell they were all having a ball. This is how I imagine Termite Terrace was at Warner Brothers, or the Fleischer Studio in the 30s. The lunatics were running the asylum, but we were all the better for it. Tonight we're going to see some rare unaired pilots, home movie footage, a selection of commercials for various products, including cereal like Quisp, Quake, Cheerios, and yes, Captain Crunch, or Cap'n Crunch, I guess. There's this collective nostalgia of sitting in front of the tube on a Saturday morning eating cereal. We've all thought that, at least, if we didn't do it. Mine was Captain Crunch. I ate boxes of the stuff. I still have the belly. Thank you, Jay Ward. Those Captain Crunch commercials were brilliant. I can't think of another series of commercials, at least from those days, that stick in my memory with such witty characters, funny storylines, as good as any series at that time. The secret sauce of Ward's studio was Jay Ward himself. Like Hal Roach, back in the 20s and 30s, he created an environment for humor to thrive. Oops. And in the late 60s, when the TV networks began to dictate what the cartoonists should do or not do, Jay knew it was time to move on. I never met Jay in my official capacity as a cartoon historian. I did visit Dudley Do-Right's Emporium. Remember that on Sunset Boulevard? It opened in 1971, and Jay or his wife would be there behind the counter if you came in. And I met him there. The legacy of Jay Ward continues by his influence on numerous modern productions. I don't know any animator who wasn't influenced by the Jay Ward shows. Shows such as The Simpsons, SpongeBob SquarePants, movies like Shrek, heck, Back to the Future even. So I say again, thank you, Jay Ward. When I hear the name Jay Ward, I smile. We know the cartoon will be funny. I can't think of a weak Ward cartoon. They're all good. Who has that track record? If you've never seen the work of Jay Ward, thanks to the Ward family and UCLA archive, thanks to them, you're about to get a master class. If you're familiar with Ward's cartoons, get ready for some surprises and a lot of laughs. So ladies and gentlemen, enjoy. Thank you.